very excited about the topic of today because one of the positions we recruited the most are sales managers over the last years. Nonetheless, there are so many differences when a company approaches us and asks us, hey, can you find a sales manager? And one of the main questions is it going to be for B2B or B2C? That's why today we're going to look into both positions, analyze the differences, look at the job profiles, look at the characteristics of people who do those jobs so that we truly understand the difference, no matter if we're currently a candidate thinking about our career step or a company trying to understand who do I need to hire. Hi, this is Laura, and you're listening to the CareerBee Talks podcast, where we share all the newest insights on the recruiting world from both sides, the candidate perspective and the company perspective. Let's jump right in. Right, Luca, you are our recruiting expert in sales positions. I think you have done it all. So I'm very curious to really learn the insights and learn more about the differences between B2B and B2C. I think I know, but when we have this discussion, I'm sure I'm going to learn so much more.
Okay, so let me start by defining the terms so that we all know what we're talking about. So B2B sales manager is a business-to-business sales manager, and they are focusing on B2B clients, B2B customers, right? So they do offer a product or a service that is relevant for companies to purchase. Let's say in an industrial setting, and the salesperson works for a manufacturer of electronic parts, and then they are selling to other industrial companies who need these electronic parts for their machines, for example. Yeah? This is a classical example of a B2B sales manager role. On the other hand, the B2C, business to customer, means that the person is selling to private clients. Yeah, so they are selling products or services to a private person. Sounds a bit weird, but that's essentially what it means. And an example here would be insurance, for example, is a typical use case. Of course, there's also B2B insurances, but I would say 80%, 90% is in the B2C area. Telecommunications, what type of internet do you have at home? What type of mobile phone subscription do you have? Or energy and gas. The whole real estate segment is B2C. Yeah, so these are the examples.
Awesome. I have two questions that follow up on this. One would be, let's say, I imagine being a company, of course, you know your products, right? You know what you have to sell. So, you know, it's like B2B or B2C. But then the one question I would have is like, what is more difficult to recruit? Like, how successful can I be because my business is B2B or B2C? And then like on the other hand, and I think both will be answered the same way, as a person, like really what sales is more difficult to do based on the requirements you have on the sales you need to make.
Okay, yeah. So for a recruiting company, it's different, let's say. I always hate this answer, but I would not say that one recruiting is harder than the other. So a B2C sales recruiting process is usually characterized by higher volume. There's a lot of people in this area. People enter into it and out of it at a much higher frequency. And on the other hand, a B2B, everything is a bit more traditional, a bit slower. The recruiting process take longer time. You usually have one position available, and then you talk to 5 candidates and you make your decision. Whereas in a B2C process, oftentimes a company has a lot of sales people that they're trying to recruit at the same time, not just one. And then they talk to a lot of people always, and it's very fast moving. So it depends what your preference is. I would say the B2C is definitely a bit more stressful in the recruiting. You just have so much touch points with multiple candidates, and the volumes are lower in the B2B recruiting. So it's moving along slower, and you have a bit more time to catch up on emails and phone calls and track your candidates. So yeah, the B2C recruiting process usually is a bit more messy. That's definitely true, I would say.
Yeah, makes sense. And maybe also like one term I've heard when also doing some recruiting in this area was like, what is the ticket size of, right? And then also because of that, it also shows like, let's say in B2B businesses, the ticket size is bigger. So how much revenue you make per one sale, but the processes takes longer, right? So over the year you make huge sales, but each sale takes longer. And in B2C, sorry, many times the ticket size is smaller. You make less per sale, but you have to make more sales per year. So you also
Yeah.
need more people to get at
Yeah.
the same number, so to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Very, very good point. And this is also why the skill set is a bit different. And you said,
Yeah.
or in your question, you asked, which one is more difficult to do as a salesperson? Probably also not a 100% right answer, because people have different skill set. And for example, in B2C, as you said, lower ticket but high touch point, it's a different skill set required. You need to be motivating you on a different level, like every day, and then be also able to talk to a lot of different people. Whereas the B2B person maybe it's a bit more strategic usually in mapping out the target customers, for example, and who to actually talk to. But if they get a deal, then a lot of money is flowing. However, there's one exception to B2C and high ticket, and sometimes they even have the highest tickets of all. It's real estate agents, right? If you
All
sell
right.
if you sell homes and the home sells for 1 million, they
Yeah.
also, and suddenly this process is a very typical B2B driven process, because how many homes are they selling? I recently saw a
Mm.
very interesting graphic where they had like, okay, this amount of real estate people, I think was in the US, sell this amount of homes. And then they had like, in recent times been quite tough on them. They had like 50%, I don't know the numbers anymore, but X% like made zero sales the whole year. We're like, oh, ooh,
Well,
that's
yeah.
not good. And then you have a lot of them doing like one, two, or three maybe. And then you have a few of them maybe doing 5 or 10 or even more, but those are really doing well. So it's quite interesting. The real estate is
Yeah.
the example with very high ticket sales
Oh,
for
interesting.
B2C.
Good that you point this out. But you already started talking about skills. What would you say? Let's start with B2C. What are like important skills to find in a good salesperson?
B2C sales, I would say very high levels of empathy for the very different types of people. So you always need to do, and I'm not saying B2B person don't do this, so they also need to have this, but even higher, let's say in the B2C area. Okay, let's say the most extreme case is in a so-called door-to-door sales, where you really knock at people's homes, right? For
Mm-hmm.
example, to sell telecommunications or energy and gas. You meet so many different people. Like at one day you talk to someone who is in a very, very good mood, and they I don't know, for whatever reason, and then the next person you talk to just lost their job or something like this. Right, this can happen actually, and you
Yeah.
need to be super quick to switch and also identify different needs. For example, in telecommunications there's completely different need if you have person you meet that they are 70 years old, and whereas you meet someone who's 25 years old, completely different needs what they want to get out of telecommunication
Right.
subscription, right?
Yeah.
So you need to have this very flexibility of mind to adjust to the different people.
And just to add, because I know you wanted to say more things, but I also feel that it has to do with the fact that they have to pay for what you're selling. So you have to truly, get also an understanding for that person versus in B2B. It's the money of the company that is
Right?
being talked about. And that is still different. Of course, you try to get the best offer for the company, but you never feel like this pain of, taking out the money of your pocket and giving it to that
Yeah.
specific person. So the need of empathy is much higher in a B2C setting as well.
Very good point. Yeah, very good point. And it's also in the B2B area, as you said, yeah, that the person usually is not the real responsible. It's not their own money. At the same time, they maybe are not the decision maker. So that's a
Right.
common problem in B2B, sometimes in B2C also, but in B2B even more, where sometimes you have multiple hierarchies involved into a buying decision, and the buying decision ends up being very huge. So even if it's not their own money, of course they have to be protective. And that's why on the B2B side, I would say a very important trait is the ability to kind of like understand this, right? Understand different structures, different hierarchies. How are decisions made in that case? And then also having do you say this in English? A long breath. I think that's a
Yeah, like
correct term.
patience,
You read a lot of
consistency or
patience,
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
consistency and patience. So you might work on a deal over multiple weeks, and you don't get any how to say, any reward during the time. So you need to stick with it. You need to stay with it without having this nice rush of dopamine. Whereas on a B2C level with a high frequency sales, you get like multiple dopamine hits every day because you make
Hmm.
multiple sales per day. On a B2B, you really need to endure and keep with it, and sometimes over months until a deal is done.
True, true. What about the skill of numbers and analytics? Is that very important, or is it more about being able to sell something and then, accounting takes care of the money
Mm-hmm.
side of it?
Yeah, I would. So it's definitely not the highest on the priority list, I would say. You can be a very good seller even if numbers are not your thing, definitely. I think it's kind of like helps out, right? So if some salespeople, especially, they know their numbers very well. They know exactly, oh, I have to make 100 phone calls, I have to make 50 visits, I have to send how many emails, and then I will get this amount of response, and then I know, okay, at the end of the month I will have made this much in turnover or in revenue. So they know their numbers quite well, I would say. So it does certainly help in forecasting and making predictions and telling your leaders, hey, I actually got this, yes, we will reach our goals. And of course, in calculating your own paycheck, it's very important to salespeople. Always, if I invest in, I mean, seriously, also percentage-wise and probability calculations. If I invest time into this deal, will this be worth my time or am I wasting my time? What's the probability that talking to this person actually ends up
Hmm.
big way? So I would say it might not be the most important for just the results. You can also be a good seller without, but most of them, they do have quite affinity for numbers, at least when it comes to the sales process, so to say.
Yeah, right. What other, like, based on the interviews you've had and thinking about, good versus not so good candidates, what differences did you also notice in them? What made a good one?
Mm-hmm. You would not believe it, but really communication skills. So you would
Mm-hmm.
think that every salesperson does have a very high level. It's not the case. So sometimes I call someone and they apply to a sales job and you see in the resume, okay, they have been in sales for, I don't know, 10, 20 years. So you think, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they're quite good. And then like, well, but you can't hold a conversation with me now on the
Mm-hmm.
phone, right? I know we don't know each other and it's an artificial setting, but I mean, you also don't know your customers. So do you talk to your customers the same way? So that's sometimes very surprising, actually. So always check and don't just rely on a resume, but actually talk to
Mm-hmm.
people. Sometimes I have conversation and I feel like we are best friends in the first 2 minutes, right? And it's usually
Nice.
a good sign. Someone knows how to sell themselves. Also, that's important. One
Yeah.
lesson I learned by sitting in all of these interviews: you never sell the product. You usually sell yourself first,
Mm-hmm.
and then you maybe sell the product. But first of all, you need to establish the trust. You need to be empathetic for the other person and understand their side and their needs. And this is by selling yourself, and then you sell the product usually.
And do you feel there's a difference in how, like, this communication skill gets evaluated by yourself, for example, if it is a B2B versus a B2C setting? Or would you say that is actually a skill that counts for both the same?
So I would say both need to have very high level of communication, but what does good communication mean? Might be a bit different. A B2B person is usually a bit more nuanced in the way they talk. They look for their words, whereas a B2C salesperson, because they talk to private people, and again, people are
Mm-hmm.
very different. They are not purchasers in a company. They are private people. They might be someone who did not finish school, versus they might be someone with a PhD degree. They talk to the same person on the same day. And so they can adjust and they can also sometimes talk a bit more slang style, but it's not necessarily bad. It depends what type of product you're selling to which target group, right? Whereas in B2B, the conversations all pretty much sound the same because everyone is trained on the same level of communication. Okay, this is how you do business communication. So
Yeah.
if someone is already in B2B, most likely they talk this way.
All right. Yeah, makes sense. I would guess that another skill that is more relevant to B2B candidates is like this relationship. I don't know, is it called maintenance, so to say? Because I feel many times in a B2C setting, you sell to that person once and that's it, whatever. And then with a B2B setting, first of all, because the process takes longer and you have to stay in touch with them over, months, you have to have a strong relationship. Plus, many times companies, when they have a seller of something will come back to it as well as the company requires those resources. Or am I wrong in that? Which I'm fine with, by the way.
Mhm. No, it's a good point. I'm just thinking about it. It sounds logical. Somehow my gut feeling is it's actually the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a B2C person is closer to the customer because they are talking to the private
Mm-hmm.
me in that case, right? I am your consultant for energy and gas. With me, you always make sure that you pay the lowest energy bill that you can. This
Mm-hmm.
allows your family then to go on one other business trip. Don't you want to spend more time with your family? That would be pretty nice. Make all this bonding, great memories. Compared to this, yeah, hello, Mr. So and so. Yes, we've been in touch multiple times now over this B2B electronics deal. Yeah, just want to check in. What's the status? It's a
Mm-hmm.
rather superficial conversation, whereas the B2C
Right.
conversation, I think it's a bit deeper. So,
Yeah.
and I know sometimes B2C sellers that tell me on the phone, hey, I've been in this business for 20 times. For 20 years, I have people in the telecommunications and they call me every 2 years if I have a new deal for them for their
Mm-hmm.
phone subscription.
No, that's true. That's true. I like to brainstorm on these things to get your perspective as well. And then maybe switching the perspective a little bit towards companies, so to say. How can you attract the best B2B salesperson versus the best B2C? Do you have to do it differently? Does the salaries vary a lot?
Yeah, they do vary a lot. So the B2B side is usually with a higher fixed salary, and then you do have commissions, but they are not quite as aggressive, maybe as you would say, unless you're talking in tech sales, they're a bit more aggressive. But even in tech sales, you still have a higher fixed salary. So we're talking entry level, maybe 40, 50,000, and then a small provision on top. Again, the deals take longer. It's not so easy to see. And in but there's usually also some either a fixed limit at the top or like an indirect limit because you just cannot reach more deals in a B2B. Um, on the other hand, in B2C, the variance is higher. So in B2C, there is either a rather low fixed salary, for example, 2,000 euros, 2,500 euros is what some companies are doing, 3,000. And then higher commission models on top, or some companies even who say we don't work on a with a fixed base salary. We work with the highest commissions that they are, and you can earn six figures without any education. You don't need a specific background education. You don't need even experience. If you do what we show you, if you're a good seller, if you treat your customers well, you make us a lot of money, then you also earn a lot of money. This is some model that's maybe more common in the US also than in Europe, but there are some companies like this in Europe. So yeah, it definitely varies.
Yeah. Makes sense. And do you tend to see that specific companies need more help when it comes to recruiting? Like, let's say sales managers in B2B are more difficult to find, or is there
Mhm.
nothing that can be said about that?
Yeah. So we at CareerBee, we usually get more project requests from B2B companies than we get from B2C companies. We also do sometimes B2C. It happens a lot of times, but more, I would say, what is the percentage, Laura? Would you say 80%, 20% probably, I
Yeah,
would
maybe
guess.
like that, right?
Yeah. Which again has to do with the B2B. It's like usually one person. I have not had the case so far. It does exist, but usually not where a B2B company comes to us and says, I need 20 salespeople. It usually doesn't happen. Maybe it's because of our positioning, because we are really positioned in the industrial space a lot. But usually they have one position, one person left, or is retiring, or a position is newly created, and then they want someone for this one position. It's a
Yeah.
very specialized position. So if they run job ads, usually no one applies or no one with the right qualification applies. That's one thing I did not talk about so far is the B2B profile have a very specific requirement list. So they want someone who has sold this type of machines or at least in the electronic space for a couple of years. And so
Mm-hmm.
this leads to rather specific searches where not a lot of candidates like this are available. And then we can do our outreach, we can do our headhunting, we can do targeted social media or LinkedIn campaigns or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the B2C space, you can try it. You can just write a job ad for B2C. Usually the requirement is not super high. You need to be good talking with, but we don't care in
Right.
B2C. No one cares about your background usually.
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of candidates anyhow, and then question of recruitment is a different. You need to select the best out of 100, or the best 10 out of 100, for example. Whereas in B2B, company needs to select just someone who passes the bar out of 5 applicants.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, this would be a nice way to round it up, to be honest. But if we have forgot about anything when it comes to comparing, B2B to B2C sales, is there anything you still want to add?
Oh, maybe just that that both are fine, right? So we kind of like pinned them against each other just for comparison's sake. So there's not one industry that's better than the other. That's just important to say. You can be very successful in both. There are great salespeople in both. It's just different in systems and sales processes that then relate back to compensation models and educational requirements. But both are great, and you can make a lot of money as a salesperson in both of them, and you can also switch in between them, right? I've seen many times people start in B2C, go to B2B later on. People actually start in B2B, but they want to have faster moving deals, so then they switch to a B2C roles. Both is possible.
That sounds good. And just to come back to what you said before with, when do you need help? Is there more help needed in a specific role? And we practically said it always depends in the end. That's, I think, always our answer. There's no right or wrong. But if you as a company feel that currently you would need support with your B2B or B2C sales, feel free to reach out via the email that we're going to leave in the show notes. And we're very happy to get in touch and to support you along the way. And if you are a sales expert that has, various years experience, but is now looking for the next step, also feel free to always reach out to us. We're happy to get in touch. And then maybe we'll have an open position in the future that could fit. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you are a company who's currently looking to expand their team with amazing talent, make sure to check out our website, CareerBee.io, to learn more about our recruiting services and how we can help you find the best candidate for your open roles. On the other side, if you are a candidate who's currently looking to find a job in the US or Germany, make sure to explore our website, careerbee.io/talents, to see how our masterclass and our additional career services can get you to find your dream job. In any case, you can always reach out to our team via the email team@careerbee.io. We are so happy to continue sharing many more insights around recruiting and job searching.